This is the beginning of a three-part series, Thursday series. We were supposed to have District Attorney Derek Linton from New York City, but turns out that he's working on a huge murder case and the judge won't let him come. So we're trying to reschedule him, and instead of him, we were able to bring up Andrew Kooman, who's going to be here in a couple of weeks, and I'm really excited about Andrew. Let me tell you about Andrew in just a little bit. Next week, we'll be having with us Devon Franklin, who works at Columbia Studios, so make sure that you come next week as well for Thursday series. Andrew Kooman is an amazing guy. I've got to interact with him on the phone and over email and this morning, and I just want to share with you a little bit about his background. The stuff that he's done, the playwrights and stage stuff that he's done has been published around the world and translated 10 times. He started a film and studio company, Unveil Studios, and they host a recording and film studio called The Space, which is in Alberta, Canada. He's the author of a critically acclaimed stage play, She Has a Name, which toured in Canada this last year, and there's a new film coming out this coming May entitled We Are the Body. I'm really excited to engage you this morning, Andrew, and share with us what God has put on your heart.
Well, before I start, this will be the first time I've done it. A Seventh-day Adventist selfie. Can I do that? Can I get you all to, see if it works? Represent. This is for my own selfish social media purposes. They look terrible. But I'll also do one of these because there's so many of you and you're so far away, and I have to have a record that you actually exist. There you go. Well, so good to be with you today. It's a privilege for me to join you at the Thursday series. I've been blessed and inspired to see the practical love and love in action kind of faith on display among Seventh-day Adventists. And I hear you might not all be, but that's okay. I'm not either, but we're all part of the body of Christ, which is great. And I'm always grateful to have the opportunity to share, especially with students, from my life and just about truth. What I hope you'll get from me, if you don't get anything else, because I'll talk for about 20, 25 minutes if you got to time it, that I hope you take away that as you walk out your faith and pursue your passion, that you'll have the most fulfilling and purposeful life possible. That's really been my experience, and I want to share a bit about that today. I was introduced to Andrews University through my friend Eric Raja in Lacombe, in Alberta, in Canada. And he started the foundation called A Better World Canada, and they do development work around the world, really amazing stuff. Through my work in addressing justice issues, I'm involved in two partnerships with A Better World. One is a well water project in Sudan, in a village called Atar, that's just been really devastated by violence. We did a documentary film about our friend Money Benny, who is a former child soldier, and he has the dream to go back to Sudan to build water wells. And the other is the She Has a Name project in Bangkok, Thailand, which helps restore young women who have willingly left the sex trade in Bangkok. And so I'll do probably my only shameless plug right now at the top. If you stop by my website, andrewkooman.com, and you spell Kooman K-O-O-M-A-N, not like the spice, it's K-O-O-M-A-N. I just posted a post this morning about the Home and New Beginnings project, and they've launched a new website with a number of ways that you can connect to their work, and so go check it out. I'll be referencing that through the speech. And if you sign up for my mail list and get some free stuff, that's up to you. So over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to travel back and forth to Malaysia to work on two different publications, one called Disappointed by Hope, and a new one that we're working on right now to bring to life. It's kind of in that editing process. It's called Hope in Action, and it's about the ways that migrants and refugees throughout Asia are trafficked and exploited into Malaysia. And the book also highlights things that people like you and me can do to address these injustices. On these trips to Asia to do research and to write stories, I met men and women from all over Southeast Asia, and I wanted to share one short reflection from my time meeting one man. His story is incredible. It's hard to believe, but sadly, his circumstances aren't unique. He's one of thousands of people who have fled the brutal and evil military regime in Burma or Myanmar. And I met with him secretly while he was hiding from the police on an afternoon in Penang, Malaysia. So I'll just read from a passage of something I wrote. He had no reason to lie to us. The tears on his face said it all. They appeared suddenly, streamed clear lines on his dark skin. The first, the only tears I saw during my time meeting with refugees in Malaysia, listening to their stories of survival, of exile, of suffering and displacement. Tears precious to me. I wish I could have collected them in the palm of my hand, or maybe in a small vial with a lid, bring them back with me to North America to show you. Perhaps we could have found a seed or a small sapling to plant in the ground now that the snow is melted. Break open the vial of tears to water the soil, a single tear enough to grow a whole tree, the kind of nourishment that only comes with suffering. We met Noor mid-afternoon after the heat of the day had reached its peak and the humidity had rolled out like one large cloud, invisible but heavy, covering everything with its weight and presence. We wanted to walk with him out into the jungle, deep into the trees, where his small community of 55 people, mostly men, live in huts made carefully out of tree branches and plastic bags, cardboard, garbage, whatever things you use to make shelters out of when you hide away in the jungle. But we didn't go with him to see the community because it wasn't safe. The police were raiding their makeshift village over the last few days, as police in Malaysia do. So we sat with him, the 6 of us, in a quiet restaurant at the bottom of an apartment building on a block of concrete lined by green. Vegetation in Malaysia is vibrant and alive. Turn your back on it for a moment and it grows. Jealous and hungry trees stretch out their limbs. Vines creep and advance toward the edge of all things. But we sat there on the edge of the jungle we couldn't enter for fear of the police, though at any moment it seemed the jungle would advance on us, so both of us might get our wish. I asked questions with Stanley, the translator. He was an aid worker from a local parish, Catholic parish, and he relayed the questions to Noor in Bahasa. His story came in pieces, was interrupted by memory that covered his soft features in shadow, and interjections from the other parishioners who had joined us to assess the needs of the community by his tears. Noor is a Rohingya, a Muslim from Burma, one of the millions of people suddenly stateless and internally displaced when the government announced in 1982 that the Rohingya were no longer citizens in the country where they had always lived. The policy that made them a stateless people was the first of many injustices that would lead to the exodus of millions of Rohingya from Burma over the subsequent decades. Noor left with his family the following year in 1983, and like so many others, went to Bangladesh. Only 13 at the time, his whole life ahead of him. Little did he know he would spend the next, count them, 14 years in a refugee camp and be witness to horrors both small and great. Quietly, in a near whisper, Noor recounted the story of his imprisonment, 7 years in a jail in Bangladesh. A girl in the camp, beautiful and young, only 11 years old, was raped and killed by a group of worthless local men. It's the kind of things that happen to refugees, to women, to girls, helpless and displaced. The violence against the young woman, one injustice among countless others that occurred in the camp. The community Noor was a part of had been ambushed and mistreated by locals many times, and it was all too much. Noor went and spoke to the officers who had authority in the camp. The community was furious that the perpetrators of the crime against their innocent daughter had not been brought to justice and no legal process was underway. When Noor had spoken his mind and left, after vocalizing his anger, after speaking up for the community, he was accosted by officers, severely beaten, and thrown into jail. There was no trial. There was no accusation, only a clear message from the powers that be that it was better for him and the community to keep the collective mouth shut. And there Noor stayed, in jail, for 7 years, until he somehow escaped and fled to Malaysia. Like a puzzle spilled out on a tabletop, many of the pieces of his story are disconnected for me, flipped over. The border is framed, and I have a sense of the greater picture, enough of the context to understand the scope of his suffering. I'm unable to connect it all and can only imagine the bits in between. Limited by language, by the short time we had, these are the pieces of the story that I was given. Stanley, the translator, and Noor had a longer conversation in Bahasa about life in the camp. The others, all Malaysians, leaned into the table in silence, occasionally shaking their heads in disbelief, looks of surprise on their faces. Stanley didn't repeat it all, didn't want to, but I could tell they were talking about different ways refugees in the camp in Bangladesh died at the hand of cruel men. As he spoke, Noor extended his hands and shaped them into the shape of guns and knives, grabbed up at his abdomen, sliced at his own limbs, described the violence. The tears trailed across Noor's face, wove quietly into his narrative when he told us that his family, siblings, a mother, 2 sons, were still in the camp, in this place where horrors were not only conveyed in dreams of the night, in this place that he fled, still living forever, just sitting there and away from their country, and worse, away from him. His wife had run. He had no knowledge of her whereabouts. If the stories themselves, the experience of sitting with this man, was not surreal enough already, his mobile phone, which rang mid-conversation, would underscore that the experience of refugees is impossible. Anything can happen, and does. On the other end of the phone was one of Noor's sons calling to say hello to the father he hadn't seen for 5 years from that very camp in Bangladesh. Just like that, even as we spoke of his family. The pride in his eyes accentuated by Noor's beaming smile as he handed me the phone and explained to me, through Stanley, that his son wished to talk with me to practice the English he was learning in the camp. I obliged and had a nice short conversation. My index finger jammed into my ear so I could hear the words across the ocean of the young boy's clear, enthusiastic English. Hello, how are you? How old? What is your name? And me, well, what else could I talk about but European football? Where I come from. Wish him well and compliment his fantastic English. But don't learn the language too well, dear child. The prayer I now pray fervently, after learning the fate of one young boy in the camp. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees wanted to have a sense from refugees within the camp about their conditions, had given a young boy with good English a phone, and would receive reports from him in secret. And camp officials found out. Why the UN official snuck a phone to the boy, I can't say. Who the men were who caught the boy and what authority they had and still have, I don't know that either. But what is clear is that they were men who held the power of life and death in their hands. And it was those hands that grabbed the young boy by the ankles when they found the phone, when they discovered what he was doing, grabbed him by the ankles and swung him around and around in the air, like a rag doll. Swung him fast and high, bashed his head against trees, against walls. A young boy, a life, a human being, swung him about till he was dead. So don't learn your English too well, dear boy, refugee child of a refugee who, from the looks of things, always will be. Are any of these stories the truth? All I can say with tears is I hope not. I want them to be lies, all of them, if only they were lies. The truth can be painful. The truth can be ugly, but the truth will set you free. This morning, I want to share about how this is something I've come to terms with in my last 10 years as a writer. I study English literature. Are there any English majors in the room? My apologies. No, just kidding. My congratulations, and I want to give you hope that there is something to do with that degree. I finished my undergraduate degree in 2003, and then the big question came, now what? What do I do, not only with my life, but with my English degree? So I called out into the void with a bit of fear and with a bit of faith. And the answer that came back was surprising. It was a simple verse from Scripture that slipped into my heart, bypassing all the questions in my mind that it was generating about career paths and all the worst-case scenarios of failure that filled the distance between my head and my heart. It was a verse from Luke that I can't recall ever really noticing before, and it fell so hard and fast into my soul, it stopped me and silenced me. And in a paraphrase from Luke 1:73, it read, "We, being rescued from the hands of our enemy, can serve God without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all our days." And that verse freed me up. To see that God's will isn't an inch-wide tightrope that I could easily fall from to my doom, but a generous space of freedom where I need not fear. And long story short, it led me on an adventure that ended up changing and shaping my life in ways that are still unfolding. As a result, I ended up in Asia to work for the University of the Nations and to teach for a few years in the School of Biblical Studies there and to serve. That experience opened up my world, giving me, for instance, the opportunity more recently to return and work on those books, one from which I just read from. It was as I stepped out willingly, responding to that free invitation to serve, that some important dots were connected for me. The main ones being that my faith in God and my passion to write and create actually work together. In fact, they feed off of each other, and they make each other grow. I bring this all up because I was invited to speak with you today about faith and about calling. I imagine that if you're sitting here in this hall, that you have an impulse to seek knowledge, to grow in your faith, and to change the world. A little bit of Googling told me that this is the mission of Andrews University, and unless you're forced here against your will, it must resonate with you in some way. This is what life is about, isn't it? To seek and to find, the pursuit of truth and meaning, finding ways to express it and write it down, to ask and answer big and small questions. I want to affirm to you today that the world needs your curiosity and passion, your expertise and your belief. In a word, the world needs your help because there's a lot of problems to solve. Think about people like Noor. How will you serve others through your calling? How will you answer the call to make life better for others? If you don't, who will? We live in a time where people want to deny and ignore reality. Times are tough and the news is all bad, and we sort of want to ignore the facts and pretend them away so we can protect ourselves. I mean, who would rather watch a World Vision commercial than Dancing with the Stars or The Voice, right? We also live in a time when it's easier than ever, especially in the Western world, to ignore our need for God. We have great hospitals, pretty good medical care. I don't know about in the States, I know Obamacare is the big, maybe a word to mention or not to mention. I'm from Canada, so I'll just stay away from that. But we got good hospitals, pretty good medical care, medication, credit cards, shopping malls, grocery stores with endless supply, gas in the tank, insurance plans, student loans, and social programs provided by the government, and a stocked gazebo that serves a pretty decent tofu burrito. I had one last night for the first time in my life, a tofu burrito, but it was good. And freedoms to boot, to believe what you want to believe, to say what you want to say, to love who you want to love, and to think what you want to think. We have so much freedom and provision, so much entertainment and so much comfort. We can be connected with people anywhere in the world, like all of you Facebooking and tweeting right now, instantly, and it's easier than ever to do so with the click of a button. We can ignore the facts happening around the world and feed ourselves with the stuff that we think will fill us and satisfy our appetites. And truthfully, with so much access to information, and I felt this, especially at the end of my degree, with so many opportunities and choices, when we think about the future, it's kind of overwhelming. What's a girl like you or a guy like me to do? All these freedoms come with big responsibility. And I just want to tell you about one thing that I did. There are two global issues that really ring my bell right now. One is the realities facing the suffering church. My new play, We Are the Body, which opens in May, is about that. And the other is the injustice faced by vulnerable children and men and women around the world, especially related to the danger of sex slavery and human trafficking. When I first encountered the issue of human trafficking, I was actually horrified, and sometimes I joke that I would have rather been hit by a bus than learn about the details. How, for instance, every year, some 1 million children are forced into some facet of the sex trade around the world. It's probably even more than that. Think of that. I was in Cambodia last year, and we went to an area notorious for child sex predation, and we saw 5-year-old kids being prepared for a night of abuse, men who were paying to abuse them sexually. It's shocking. The darkness is darker than you can imagine. But here in the United States, some 600 to 800,000 people are victims of human trafficking for labor or for sex, right here in your own backyard. When I faced these facts, I knew I had a choice. I could look away, or I could try to do something. It was that simple. Jesus, with compassion, looked at the people around him and saw that they were like sheep without a shepherd. He saw that they were oppressed and lonely, sad and confused, empty and afraid. He saw that they were helpless. And in that moment, he turned to the people who loved him and had agreed to follow him and told them to pray that God would send people to go and share his love with the very people that he saw were in need. I want to suggest to you today that your calling, that my calling, that our calling is as simple as and as general as that. If we believe in God, we are called to go and help. The good news for each of us, the exciting news, is that we can meaningfully engage our passions. We can help others through our specific calling. When you think about the field of expertise that you're studying, English majors included, do you recognize that it's part of your mandate to go and serve others? As people of faith, as human beings, as learners, it's important to understand that our calling, what our calling is, and then ask the question, how can I answer that call and serve others through it? The dictionary describes a calling as a special urge, an inclination, or a predisposition to a particular vocation or career. God called Moses out of the burning bush. When the exiled murderer and adopted prince responded, a slave nation had its deliverer. God called Samuel, Samuel, in the middle of the night, and when the miracle child of an overlooked family responded to the sound, Israel had a faithful judge and prophet. God, through an angel, called to Mary, and the womb of the virgin teen, who society considered insignificant, became the door through which God stepped into the world to make all things new. Your calling is transformational. Responding to the call on your life can literally alter history. When I learned about human trafficking, I regretted that I hadn't trained as a lawyer. How useful I could have been. At times, I wished I was adept at hand-to-hand combat so I could crack some insidious criminal skulls. But what I had in my hand was a pen, so I wrote a play. It's what I could do. I could answer this call in my life to write, to address this terrible thing newly thrown against my consciousness. Through telling a story, I could shine light in some real darkness. I want to encourage you today that God will take your little and do a lot. I know this because he's done that in my life. I'm still amazed that the play I wrote, She Has a Name, was produced, and then that it toured Canada, and now it's being optioned as a feature film, and it's being adapted into other languages so that thousands more will experience the story. Writing the story simply for me has been fulfilling as a writer, but what's more exciting is that thousands of people who didn't know about the issue of human trafficking have learned about it through this imagined story. The play pushed people over the edge into learning more about the issue, to giving time and resources to serve organization, and it propelled people into action. But the best part of it for me, and the most meaningful, is that I was able to meet victims of human trafficking who have become survivors, both in Canada, in my hometown, and overseas. In Bangkok, Thailand, our partnership with A Better World, Canada, and Eric Raja supports the Home of New Beginnings, which helps young women who have willingly left the sex trade and empowers them to live out their calling. The young women that I met there who, after years of abuse, of such trauma and darkness, are a total inspiration to me. They're the salt of the earth and the light of the world, facing impossible odds, surviving the worst kind of hatred and evil. They are proof to me of how important it is for everyone to have the opportunity to walk out their God-given calling. Some of these girls, their former sex slaves, are studying to be human resource personnel. They're in engineering. One wants to be a chef. Others are studying computers and business. Seeing people like this live out their calling, especially these young women whose lives had been stolen from them, it's the most beautiful thing to see that they have left fear behind and are now actually free to make their own contribution to improve the world. Makes me want to write another story. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the great Russian writer who told the world about the Soviet Union's forced labor system, the gulags, described the responsibility each of us has to help others through our vocations in his stunning Nobel lecture. He highlighted that our effectiveness to address the world's injustices and fulfill our purpose came simply down to this: listening for, as he said, that one word of truth that outweighs the whole world. The one word of truth that outweighs everything else is an invitation to live our true purpose. I know that if I hadn't responded to the call of freedom and stepped out into the world to serve, I wouldn't have experienced the fulfilling, exciting opportunities that have become part of my biography. I wouldn't have met men like Noor who changed my thinking, or the inspiring survivors at the home of New Beginnings. The calling on your life, while a responsibility to understand and respond to, and sometimes even a riddle to solve, is above all else a gift that gives personal meaning, and even more so, a gift to share with the world. So my question for you today as I close is, as you pursue higher learning here, and as you look to the future, are you listening for that one word of truth that outweighs the world? As you listen for it, engage with it, respond to it, it will lead you to the most surprising, the most challenging, and the most meaningful version of your life. May you have much courage and much fulfillment as you do so. Thank you, and God bless you.